Hey, 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 everyone. This is Mind Power Meets Mystic, and I am your host, Cynthia Varkevisser, this podcast's mystic. My co-host and good pal, Michelle Walters, our Mind Power Junkie, is off this episode because I asked to have all y'all to myself. So let's get into this. I am writing a book on house clearings and house blessings. And really, it's not about the actual process of the house clearings and the shifting of the energy, but what is it that I encounter and how did that encounter happen? How did that energy get there? Was it an entity? Most times it's not. I'm not saying that entities aren't around. I only deal with entities when they're fucking around with the space of the house, right? So I can tell you about a ghost that loved to walk through one house, that there was a Native American Indian that was actually cut in the corner of the house because the house was built on his hunting path. I can tell you all these things, but most of the time, when there are entities in your home, they don't bother you. They actually help. And believe it or not, a lot of times there aren't any entities in the house. There are different energies. Um, some are emotional, some are from history, some are from so many other things, right? But the book is really the stars are the houses and actually the specific parts of houses. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself on the book. Because of this, I'm so excited that I've decided to do some episodes on different types of house blessings and house clearings that we don't really talk about. So this episode, it's about beyond the walls. So we're going to be talking about the land. We're going to be talking about the energy of the land, like the electromagnetic fields and the ley lines in the land. We'll be talking a little bit about the history of your land and how that can affect how you feel. We're also going to talk about the nature of your surroundings and how that can affect how you feel as you live within your house. And of course, we're also going to talk about neighbors, and that includes condos, big neighbors, HOA associations, all that other good stuff, all in this itty bitty amount of time. So I hope if you have any questions that you send them on into the podcast, and I'm happy to answer them either by Instagram Live or have a follow-up episode. So let's get down into it. Once I decided that I was going to be doing an episode on Beyond the Walls, I was immediately brought to mind a memory of a person that I helped with her channeling business. She is an amazing healer and then discovered that she could also channel in this amazing healer um, with this incredible name that is, um, I don't think it's Incan, but definitely indigenous from Central America. And as we were going through the exercises and I was expanding, seeing how far she can reach out into the energy of her channel, when she happened to tell me that our house is good. Now, because she was channeling in this healer, and Adzimba is powerful enough on her own, with this healer, it was incredible. I could feel that the shaman or the healer was talking about the land, not just this house, which is so temporary, but the land and the history of the land. And I was shocked. I loved that because I hadn't thought about this. I love this house. I love the what we've created in this house, but I had never really considered the actual history of this house. Now, I'm going to segue a little bit. We live in Oakland, which means that there is a lot of Black Panther history here, and even more so in our neighborhood because the Black Panther movement happened in our neighborhood. It was headquartered in our neighborhood, and there's a source of pride here. Now, we went to an installation at the Oakland Museum. This is, I don't know, at least 5, 10 years back. And um, what we saw was this thing called redlining as one of the exhibits. Now, redlining back in the day when it was legal were these red greased mark, um, red grease crayon marked maps in which um, minorities were not allowed to move into or get loans from on one side of the line, but they did on the other side. And we actually got to see a red line map, which was horrifying and super incredible in this one instance. We took a look at our house, the way it was located, and all along our street, we were redlined. We were in the red line zone, except our block. If you take a look, there's a little beep, 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 a little keyhole type of thing, and we were on the other side of the red line. But every other um, block along the street for quite a ways, it was redlined. And so I thought about that. I thought it was interesting at the exhibit, but it really brought it home when I heard Ed Zimba's channel say that this land is good. And so I want to let you know that this is one of the things that we'll be talking about when I talk about clearing and understanding the energy beyond the walls. Think about it. The history of the house and the land sure affects how Dee and I live here. We have a pretty damn good life here. I have spiritual, holistic space here called BASH, Badass Space for Healing. And it doesn't mean that we don't have our arguments, but the land is good and we feed into the good land. And I'm hoping that our practices are feeding back into the land. So the reciprocity. Beyond the walls, we're going to talk about land. We're going to talk about natural elements. We're going to talk about the Earth's energetic grid lines, what I like to call ley lines and those influences, and neighbor energy. And neighbor energy can be, you know, you living in a condo and you've got neighbors sharing walls above, below, and either side of you. Or it could be that you live in a really tight community, HOA, or you happen to live in a place where at least one neighbor is not really in sync with you. And I think that's a nice way of saying that, they're butt heads, right? So these things, all these things affect us. So think about that. I think about the history that I have with some of my items, and it brings me good feelings, which means that I feed that thing energy, and that thing brings it back to me. So that is actually, if we talk about the energy of things, that's actually called psychometry. And we can save that for another day because I love that subject as well, and it feeds directly into house blessings and house clearings, just not for today. Okay, so history of the land. I told you the history of our property and how that affected us. Think about properties where the land was actually taken. It was not in agreement with. And what happens is it builds up a resentment over time. So there could be, we'll go back to when this happened to a property that we cleared up in Napa many years ago, where the land was absolutely gorgeous, 2 acres, beautiful trees, lovely house, and it just was in conflict. There was no rest there. It wasn't restful. The owners were having a challenge with it. And as we walked beyond the house, we walked the property, what happened is we realized that the American Indians, the energy of them historically were not in sync, and the resentment built and built and built. And here we now have resentment that we could feel on the property as strangers. So think about what was happening to the owners who were living there, right? Our natural elements can also affect how we feel. I mean, think about, why do we go to certain areas? Why do I love going to the ocean? Because I'm in sync with that element. That doesn't mean that I get to live over there, So I think about people who live on top of mountains. That energy is different than living at the foot of the mountain, even on the same hill, depending on if the house is above the road or below the road. There are different energies. It's really incredible how the energy of placement affects um, our human everyday life. Now, these get bought because we're a bunch of different people and we all resonate in different ways. So you may be a middle of the hill, below the street type of person and you're digging it. You may not be. Just know that the energy is different. Okay. The energetic grid lines are something else. So we could be in a beautiful place. You could love the settings. And for some reason, you can't figure out why you're not going out in the backyard. It just doesn't feel in sync with you. I had a session with a home in which it was absolutely gorgeous. Feng Shui. I'm not sure if they actually had a practitioner there um, for the backyard, but there was a beautiful water feature, other things that ticked off the boxes, but for some reason it wasn't working out. And it happened that as I was viewing the backyard, I could feel myself off balance. And it was one of the magnetic lines on the Earth's grid that was pulling in one direction. So it was a beautiful backyard, but you can only feel part of it, right? Because of that damn ley line. It's kind of like having an electric fence. So you can see everything, but you're like, I'm not going over there. And it was cuckoo bananas, but it was true. So we had to work with the ley line, and we'll talk about that in a second. And once that was done, guess what? No more challenges. The house sold. So it was really kind of cool that way. So we talked about history, we talked about natural elements, and we talked about energy grid, and now we get to talk about neighbors. So think about the environment, how it affects us, and now let's put some neighbors in. And those neighbors can be right around us, one wall away, or they can be really close. I happen to live in a house where think there's 6 feet, between 6 and 8 feet between each house. So we're not exactly a row house, but it's that amazing urban living that Dee and I love, where we can definitely hear each other's conversations. And so you learn how to, turn down your ear levels, but it also can affect how it works, right? And it doesn't mean that you're having a problem with your neighbors because they hate you. I mean, I've run into a couple of those, and there are some cures if you want to do the feng shui style, and there are also other things that we can do that are more intuitive than they are feng shui. Um, and then if there's just, we had next to us the building was a church for I don't know how many years, but it was amazing because every Sunday at 11:27 a.m., the first the first hymn was sung, and it happened to be my favorite one. So I made sure to wash the dishes while we were, while they were singing. But it was a poor church, and so the congregation kept dwindling down, and you could feel the emptiness of the space next to us. And so it was really sad. And that trust me, the hymns were kept singing and they were still beautiful, but we could feel the difference as that was happening. All right. Um, and then, like I said, with condos, it could be anybody. It could be someone that has a big personality that happens to be with you, and you want to have a sanctuary for a home, and that big personality just happens to be coming through. Or you have a neighbor whose personal space happens to be different than yours, which we had a challenge with one of my clients had a challenge with her neighbors, two neighbors, and so we wanted to work that out because she didn't want to be bombarded as she was walking into her condo, many days. So these are the things that can affect the way that it comes into our house. It can come through the walls. We can bring it in like the neighbors, right? The to assertive neighbors. So we bring that energy in as soon as we open the door, right? All these crazy, crazy things. So now how in the hell do we handle these things? I'm going to tell you a couple of stories from the house clearings that we've done, and then I'll give you a couple more tips and tricks, okay? So we're going to go a little bit backwards. We're going to start with neighbors. The one neighbor, not, I'm sorry, not the one neighbor, the one client was really lovely. They had extended family living with them because, the extended family needed a little bit of help, and the neighbors didn't like it. They happened to be in that type of community where the rest of the community were happy empty nesters, and this didn't align with that house. And so there was, I wouldn't exactly call them daggers, like when people are staring daggers at you, but there definitely wasn't a type of friendliness that surrounded the house. And the thing that was happening is that that energy just kept creeping in more and more and more into the personal space. And so it was, it was invasive, and the owners didn't want to come home. It was hard for them to enjoy their house. It was hard for them to just drive up into their driveway and use the front door if they wanted to. So what we did is that we used blessed water. And what the blessed water did is that it shifted up the energy and was a great neutralizer so that that energy that was coming in on them could dissipate and create a protection without really calling it a boundary. So you can use blessed water. You can use mirrors because you want to, reflect, have the neighbors reflect back to them um, what, what they're putting out, right? So, you can dish it out but can't take it. That's exactly what mirrors do for you. Or, how we say, I'm just mirroring you. I hated that. That was the thing that, I don't know, was that like 20 years ago that people are, I'm just mirroring. And I'm like, what the fuck? Then don't. Let me break that mirror. But I'm so spiritual, right? Okay. So these are ways that we can handle neighbors that are being a little bit challenged. You can also use mirrors when the big personality neighbors share a wall with you. We had that with the condo I was talking about. They had one neighbor that was above them that had big energy. So can you imagine having all that energy above you when you want your house to be a sanctuary? And then they had that lack of personal space neighbor. And so we used mirrors for both of them. We also did this thing. I really don't like calling them boundaries, but there's a way that you can draw a line, an energetic line, so that unless that energy of the person matches that line, it's kind of like making your own little electromagnetic field, and they don't get zapped or um, hurt in any way, but all of a sudden they lose interest in what they wanted to tell you, like they did the day before. So with those personalities, we use mirrors, which you can do for the reflection. And you can also, I like calling it draw a line in the sand or do an energetic boundary. I also like doing energetic boundaries for people at work who have open door policies and find that they can't do their work. Um, and they just have a hard time with time management because they always have people coming in. But that's, again, a different episode, right? Okay. So that is some of the ways that you can deal with neighbors. The other thing that you can do is a lot of people, they like to bury objects or into the ground and create their own electromagnetic energy that way. Absolutely fine. There are ways I like to use numbers because I believe in the power of numbers as well. And you already have your address up there. So, based on what you are intending for your house and how you want it to project outwards, I like to add numbers to your address so that the number reflects what it is that you're looking for. Okay, so that's how we deal with neighbors. For the history of the land, what we had done. So I already told you about what happened with the Native Americans in Napa. I was also in this really cool um, condo. Wasn't a condo. It was a duplex um, in the Bay Area. Super amazing, funky duplex. But I dug every moment of it, every square inch, and it had plenty of space. So it almost felt like a duet. Now, a duet is like one full home and another full home that shares one common wall. The reason that I call this a duplex is because it was so mushed together. Oh, this is a real estate thing. One is that it was so mushed together that there wasn't a way to split it up. They had to share like parking. The the other piece, and this is a real estate thing, is that there was only one lot, so both of those um, units within this one building belong to one person, which makes it a duplex. I know, so boring, but I love real estate. So there's a little real estate tidbit for you. What happened is that there was an energy, a history, and it was a ghost. And the ghost never came inside the house. But what happened is, as I was going through, I realized in the dining room that there was this space that couldn't be cleared. And when I say can't be cleared, which means doing my energetic process, it didn't shift. So that tells me that there is a different kind of energy that is being held in this place that needs to be cleared or shifted. And shifted, I mean diverted in a different way. So, just by talking to the living room, because that's where I was in, the space said that there was I'll call him a farmhand. He wasn't really a cowboy, but think cowboy times. And he really loved this orchard, and there was a favorite tree that he would go to and rest upon the tree and just kind of enjoy some time and then go about his business. And he always stayed within the area because he loved it so much. So we decided to go outside, and lo and behold, we couldn't see it from that space, but right on the other side, there was a stump, and the stump had been there for quite a while. So we had this was a house for sale. So we had the realtor go in and just put some live plant there. And that helped the energy along. Okay. So what you're doing is that you're feeding the history. You're acknowledging the history. We did ours with Amer the American Indians in Napa by drumming as best we could in the best way we knew how, and feeding the space and thanking them for all the care that they'd given to this space. And that although we couldn't rectify what had happened to them, that we could go ahead and give it the care that they had, and that shifted the energy. There was also one where there was cool house by a golf course, which meant that there was a creek running alongside it, and that part was not developed. So you could see the golf course, but we'll call it the rough. beyond the rough, there were trees, and then there was a creek, and then the houses. And there was a space that, for some reason, just people felt a little bit creeped out every time they walked there. Well, come to find out, there was a ghost of a young um, American Indian man who liked to go and hunt. And this was one of his favorite places. And so he was annoyed that he couldn't find the game that he liked. And so what I did is I talked to that ghost, because remember, it's about diverting. They weren't doing anything, they weren't hurting anybody. So what I did is I showed them a different path. I showed them a different path that brought them outside of the house so that he wasn't um, bisecting a piece of the house as he was going through looking for his game. And lo and behold, that house sold. I think, I think they got an offer within 2 hours that I diverted that energy. I mean, that was kind of crazy cool. So that's the history of the land. So you acknowledge. You can acknowledge it by doing an action. You can acknowledge by doing something kind of sacred, like an altar, or you can have a talk if you trust your intuition enough. Now, we're going to talk about the natural elements. With natural elements, you know, we're working with what's there, and builders aren't always thinking about feng shui or placement. They're thinking about, let's take a look at, let's have this view from the kitchen. Let's take advantage of this as they were moving, as they are plotting out the home. I'm not mad at that, right? I enjoy scenery just as much as everyone else. However, sometimes it doesn't line up with um, the home and the elements. So the house is uncomfortable, meaning that it's situated uncomfortably, which means you're uncomfortable. And so you want to do things inside the house as well as outside the house in order for the energy to sync up a little bit better with its outside environment. That's by you can do meandering paths out, in the yard. You can um, switch the energy a little bit by having water features in certain areas, gardening in certain ways, having different kinds of rocks, and on the inside as well by situating it a little bit differently. That doesn't mean you have to sleep in the kitchen because, you know, in feng shui, the kitchen should be in a certain area. But what that does mean is that you want to take the elements of what the kitchen represents and put it in your bed area, your bedroom, just as a nod. So it could be something as, you know, in my house, we tend to have, I mean, like cough drops, but that doesn't always have to be a cough drop, a Jolly Rancher, something sweet, right, for the house. We like having flowers in our bedroom, these kind of things. And what it does is it's not absolutely typical, but it's not so unusual that it just feels funky in your space, and you're acknowledging the outside elements in. Okay. For the energetic grid lines, this is something where, you know, Mama Earth has her own thing going on, and we are just temporary little beings hanging out, doing the best we can, trying not to fuck up what we got. Okay. So there are these energetic grid lines. They're amazing when you experience them. A lot of times we don't because we're so busy being in urban settings, walking on sidewalks with shoes on, things on our mind, places we need to go in our cars, you know what I mean, dealing with transportation. And so we don't get to experience these energetic grid lines. When they happen, what you want to do is disrupt the ley line just enough so that it doesn't mess your house. It doesn't mess up with your house and the energy of you within the home or the yard or wherever it is. And this can be done by, again, placing plants not in the ground, but placing potted plants, doing things in certain ways, having certain elements. For a while, mirrored balls were like a huge deal, and these decorative things. A lot of people liked using them to help do the deflection of the neighbor that I was talking about. Um, but you can also use it here for ley lines. For us, what we did is that we took this ley line was cutting through the dining room. And so what we did was there just happened to be this beautiful potted tree, and we moved the potted tree, and amazingly enough, we moved it to disrupt the ley line enough that it softened the energy in the dining room area. And it also looked great in the backyard. Like you couldn't tell that we even moved it. It looked like it belonged where we put it, which is, mwah, right? Magnifique. So that's how energy grid lines can be worked out. That's a whole lot of information. So let's just talk about some key things, right? Let's summarize. One, when it comes to neighbors, there are so many things that you can do. And don't worry about if they don't like you or if they're having a sad life. The the solutions are the same. So you don't need to get into their biz a whole lot, right? Just go and do the things so that you can create that sacred space that you love. Mirrors, plants, um, burying things, shifting the energy by using numbers, so many different things. Blessed water. Um, think about um, changing up your yard a little bit, bringing some of the outside in. So many different things that you can do just by understanding that you are affected in your home beyond your walls. So take a take a moment and think about your space. What kind of energy does it hold? Is there anything that you want to shift? Have you shifted it on the inside? Or let me rephrase, have you done all the things that you needed to do on the inside and it still hasn't shifted up? There are so many other variants that can help you do that move. All right? So just think about that. And most of the time, when we are uncomfortable, it's an emotional thing. So really tap into the emotion of what is it you want. What are you asking of your home and the land for your home? And how are we going to shift that up? And how do you want to shift that up? All right. You can do this yourself, or you can give me a call. No problem. Either way, it's a lot of fun. It's a great thing to think about. I hope that you have gotten some information that you can see just how much power we have over our environment, um, especially when we are working in concert with our environment and not against it, right? I hope that you find great pleasure in your space, even more so, and that you come for other episodes to find other things that can help you out, not with just houses. Mind Power Meets Mystic talks about so many things, and we are here to help you. So I hope you have a lovely day, that you find peace and love and soul. That's a Soul Train thing. All right. Have a really, really good session or day, and I will see you again soon.